our time and interest over the last month or so. And for Brazil, they have spent somewhere upwards of $14 billion on the World Cup. $14 billion. And yet they still have people within their nation who live in poverty. They still have barrios that don't have proper sanitation or proper electricity or health care or anything like that. So is that moral? Is it moral that we allow such things to take place? Is it moral that I watch the games and enjoy them, knowing that truth? In the United States, the introduction of affordable health care by the president has caused this massive fight to take place between the Democrats and the Republicans. Is it a political issue, or is it a moral issue? Here at home, the oil sands project in Alberta is bringing that province and our nation billions of dollars. It strengthens our economy. It raises up standard of living, especially in Alberta. But it raises up standard of living. Makes life better for people. But it comes at a huge environmental cost. Is it moral? And no discussion about morals would be complete without bringing up Rob Ford. I applaud his efforts at rehab, I really do. And I truly do hope that he's turned his life around. But is it moral for a politician who has abused drugs and been outwardly used intimidation for political gain, lied to people, been outwardly racist and homophobic, to remain in power? And what does it say about the moral values of people in Toronto who are still prepared to vote for him come October? Now, people may say that one of the reasons we have this moral crisis taking place right now, these moral debates going on, is because we've allowed society to get away from its moral center. Everything has become relative, and so the moral viewpoint is decided by the individual, not by the society or community. Where once society exerted a moral code on people to govern behavior, that no longer seems to be the case. Where once we were governed by certain moral absolutes, specific moral principles, now it seems each person is free to decide for himself or herself what is moral, what is right, what is wrong. As long as we allow such relative morality to hold sway, our society will seemingly continue in this downward spiral into moral chaos. Perhaps it's time to reestablish some strict moral guidelines, some unassailable moral values that will help us get back to a time when things were black and white, when the morality of the society was based on sound biblical values rather than the whims of the individual or a specific group. Although, I do have to ask whether such a moral code ever really existed within society. Were things ever black and white? Did sound biblical values lead to principles of right conduct? Well, of course, is the obvious answer. 50 or 60 years ago, when questions of moral conduct were so much easier to address, we did not have the moral confusion of the present day, and so obviously things were better back then. I blame Tommy Douglas. He was the one who opened up a whole can of worms by asserting that access to affordable health care was a moral issue, a matter of human dignity, human right, rather than just a political or economic cause. Homosexuality was still considered a crime within that time, within our lifetimes. Homosexuality was considered a crime, punishable by imprisonment. Society's moral code regarded homosexuality as a sin, as a disease, as corrupting, as an abomination. And so it was hidden. It was a shameful thing. No one spoke about their gay uncle. He was a committed bachelor, they said. And so any debate over gay marriage would be entirely impossible. No one debated the environmental impact of our actions. The pollution of land and water and air was regarded as part of our quest for a more comfortable life, because biblical principles told us we had dominion over the earth. That's what God said in the book of Genesis. We had been called by God to subdue the earth to our purposes. So we were morally justified in whatever we did to the environment, as long as it was to our benefit. Our past moralities did not prevent us from abusing women, exploiting developing nations, robbing First Nations people of their land and their culture, treating those of different cultures as inferior or undeserving, disregarding the poor because they were thought to be lazy. It's not a matter that the society has lost its moral compass, its moral center. It is that the moral code we live by is not so simple. It is not black and white, and it never has been. To be absolutely honest with you, I think our moral struggle in the present day is an excellent thing. It is a good thing that we have this struggle going on, because it means we are actually addressing the issues and concerns and moral questions that we have avoided or swept aside or hidden for generations. It wasn't too long ago that to be seen as gay or effeminate within a community made you a target of abuse, both physical and verbal. But our society has progressed to the point where we no longer see a person's sexual identity as criminal. People are openly gay and celebrating it, as we witnessed in the Toronto World Pride Day back in June. For the first time in history, gay people do not need to sneak around, fearful of being caught, being exposed, held up to ridicule, being beaten or killed simply for who they are. Should gay people be allowed to marry? The only reason we can have that debate is because we are actually recognizing the humanity and the dignity of the gay person. In the States and in other countries, affordable health care is provoking powerful debate because people recognize the immorality of so many within the nation being impoverished by health care. The debate over health care, both in the U.S. and here in Canada, speaks to the moral understanding of a society's responsibility toward its most vulnerable citizens. We debate the environmental risks of the oil sands because the biblical attitude of subduing the earth, of dominion, has been transformed into a moral understanding that such dominion requires good stewardship on our part. People no longer believe that we have the right to exploit the world's resources heedless of the human or environmental cost. So as those issues have entered into the debate, the morality under which we have operated has also come open to debate. Now, if you ask people what we base our moral code upon, a lot of people might have said the Ten Commandments, which we read this morning. They are clear, they're unequivocal, they're black and white. Do not kill, do not steal, do not lie, do not break trust. Of course, no one even today in this more open moral atmosphere would suggest that those were bad things. Murder is still murder. Stealing is still wrong. Lying is inappropriate. But I wonder if a more useful guiding principle for the present day might be the Beatitudes instead of the Ten Commandments. The Beatitudes invite us to understand that our moral strength is found in our compassion and in our justice above all else. To be moral is to base our decisions, our actions, our attitudes on what is right, on what is just, on what is fair for all people, over what is legal or customary or traditional. What if we based our moral choices on our hunger and thirst for righteousness? What if our moral choices were informed by our desire to be merciful above all else? What if our ethics were defined by the commitment to be peacemakers? When Jesus shared the Sermon on the Mount, of which the Beatitudes that we read this morning are the opening lines, he was inviting us to see our moral code, our ethical principles in a new way. He was, in essence, asking us, inviting us to base our life choices, our moral choices, on our humanity, on our spirits of grace and mercy and justice. Jesus still called for people to follow the commandments, but rather than regarding them as the religious leaders of his time did, as black and white, as legalistic, and as limiting, he called for us to see within the commandments the spirit of dignity and respect for all humanity which marked his ministry. And the remainder of the Sermon on the Mount, which we find in chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew, all focus on that moral code based on promoting our spirit of compassion, our spirit of humanity. When we read it, we also read things like, so when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Do not judge so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. In everything you do, do to others as you would have them do to you. For this is the law and the prophets. A moral code based on the Beatitudes, based on the principles of the Sermon on the Mount, invite us, empower us to craft a society that has the courage to face up to and address the moral issues within our society that speak to the deepest needs and dignity of the human spirit. Our true moral code is based on how we defend one another, how we support one another, how we encourage one another, how we care for one another, how we lift up one another, especially those who are weakest, those who are most vulnerable within our society. And yes, that even includes Rob Ford. So what is the church's role in this? Can the church be a meaningful, expressive, righteous, authoritative, authentic, moral voice in this day and age? Well, you have to come next week to hear that.